You likely know people who have made sucking on the lemons of life an art form. They are the bitter, grumpy people in our lives. Of course, we also know people who seem to get sweeter by the year. They are the ones who are full of grace and kindness. Somehow they took those same bitter lemons in life and they made lemonade. And why do some people become better with age and others just become bitter? In this episode, we'll see that it's not so much what happens to us, but how we respond to those circumstances in our lives that makes a difference.
Welcome to our Leadership Matters podcast. Phil has had the privilege of mentoring leaders and coaching ministry teams around the world for several decades, and he's really looking forward to sharing with you some of the principles that others have found helpful over the years. To access all of our podcasts, as well as our leadership resources, just click the links in the description box or go to icmcanada.org/leadership matters. If you want a copy of this complete study, just click on the link to download it. Now let's join Phil for this episode.
Throughout a lifetime, we all have a wide range of experiences. Joy from many positive ones interspersed with our fair share of negative, painful ones. When we start our journey, we have no control over how many of each we will have or exactly what direction our life will take, of course. When we are young, we thought we are the masters of our fate and in control, but later on in life, we've come to realize that ultimately this is not the case. People typically attribute the various events in their life to either God directing their path or just the universe dishing out random coincidences. But whatever one's worldview, we probably have less control over the events that we once imagined we did when we were young. As believers, we know that God has been guiding our lives all along. Paul reminds us in Romans of what God's real purpose is, even in the painful experiences of life. He says, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope. Since life happens to all of us, what is the difference between becoming better or bitter? Why does suffering produce hope in some and despair in others? Paul had a perspective that allowed him to see even suffering as a means to becoming more Christ-like. With the right attitude, we too can resist the tendency to become bitter as we age. I think we can ask ourselves some questions that will help us move towards being that kind, gracious, older person that we aspire to, rather than that jaded, cynical one. The first of these questions is, who are we really trying to please? Are we still trying to get approval and acceptance from others, or do we get it from God? It's amazing how many of us have our parents' voice in our heads that we're trying to please, long after they are gone and we're well into our golden years. Only as we rest in God and apply these principles that we have looked at in the series can we too become content with where we are at, knowing that finishing our race means only fulfilling the calling that God has on our lives, not the expectations that others may have for us. I think it may also be helpful to ask ourselves, what needs are we trying to meet, and what bitter feelings are we still hanging on to? Have we become a victim, blaming others for the injustices of life that have befallen us? We'll never become that better person by laying all of our problems at the feet of others. It is only as we bring our needs and insecurities to Jesus and receive His forgiveness that we can move on. This will mean that we have to develop new patterns of thinking and behaving. And our past needs to not define our future. It doesn't have to. Joseph was a good example of this when he revealed himself to his brothers, and he did not blame them for his circumstances, but rather comforted them and spoke kindly to them. If anybody would have had reason to be bitter, it would have been Joseph. But regardless of what life had dealt him, he responded with forgiveness and mercy. So can we. Another key question to evaluate if we will become better or bitter is, are we still in competition with something or someone? Continuing to compare ourselves, what we have done, or even our ministry only produces the negative fruit of rivalry, envy, and jealousy. As we read in Galatians, let us not become conceited, provoking and envying each other. Allowing this to take root will mean that we'll become that grumpy old man one day, Oh, okay, I don't want to leave the ladies, I don't want you to feel left out here. There are also a few grumpy old women around, but my guess is there are probably not quite so many. If we release ourselves from the expectations we have placed on ourselves, or from the regret over what could have been, all those regrets, we'll be well on our way to becoming that better person. Another challenging question is to determine what rewards have we been seeking. Well, as we enter this final season of life, we may find ourselves dealing with the emotions of frustration and even anger that the benefits that we thought would come our way from a lifetime of serving God have not materialized. These could be in the area of financial compensation, of course, but they could also include feelings that our sacrifices have not been compensated by the Lord in other areas. Perhaps a better life, or a better marriage or family, a more fulfilling career or ministry. You can fill in the blank. At some point, though, we'll have to accept the way things are and come to terms with what our real expectations out of life were. Proverbs remind us that a heart of peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. Unfulfilled expectations in this area are often expressed in anger towards the Lord, perhaps outwardly, but more likely we'll just internalize these feelings. What this does over time is harden our hearts and limit our relationship with God. Perhaps this is what Peter was thinking when he said, "We have left everything, Lord. What then is there going to be for us?" We often don't put this in words, but have you ever thought something like that? Spoiler alert, you're not alone. We probably all have. It's so easy to become like the elder brother in Jesus' parable of the prodigal son. He never left his father's house, but was resentful that his faithfulness had not been rewarded in the way he thought it should have been. To get rid of cynicism and bitterness, we'll have to be honest and come clean with the Lord, ultimately trusting Him that He has been guiding our lives all along. I think we also need to acknowledge that the books don't always balance this side of eternity. If we expect everything to make sense and the ledger to be completely balanced on this earth, we are setting ourselves up for disappointment and disillusionment. For most of us, questions will remain. Some pain will be unresolvable. So we'll have to make a choice. Will we trust that God is in control of our lives, and that one day what doesn't make sense now, He will explain to us? I would suggest that this is the only healthy way forward. So as we go to a break, can you relate to any of these questions? What would you need to do in order to increase your bitterness quotient and not your bitter one? Do you really trust that God has been leading your life and will continue to do so?
To view or listen to any of Phil's other podcast series, visit icm.org/Leadership Matters. His Mentoring Intelligence series discusses issues of servant leadership and how to leave a legacy by investing in others. Other series include a study of how to develop and manage multicultural teams, a series to strengthen your marriage, the first team, as well as a discussion of how to implement the equipping gifts in a local church. You could also check out our CLI, Christian Leadership Institute, which is a unique competency-based ministerial training program. To download any of our resources associated with these series, visit our library of materials at icm.org/resources.
We've been looking at some questions that can help us evaluate the likelihood that we will become either better or bitter as we age. A particular challenging question to ask ourselves is there any guilt or shame that we are covering up in our lives? Have we covered up things over the years that have been eating at our soul like a cancer? It took King David a year to come clean, but he eventually prays, "Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting." 1 year is bad enough, but if we hold on to guilt for many years, it can build up in our hearts to the point that it can hinder us from moving forward. Without the same attitude as David, we will not be able to keep the faith and finish the race. So here's a final question. What are the values that inform and drive our convictions? As we age, we will continue to be tested to see if we will remain committed to having a servant attitude, or if, with our greater wisdom and experience, we feel that we've earned the right to be served a little bit by others. We must regularly examine ourselves to evaluate our values in this area. Living our lives based on biblical values will enable us to remain humble and gracious rather than bitter towards how life or others have treated us. James writes, "Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom," he says, "does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, it's unspiritual, it's even demonic. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and every evil practice." Okay, obviously James was never one for pulling punches, I think his point is pretty clear. True wisdom is exercising humility, not showing everyone how great we think we are. So just before we wrap up this episode, let's consider each of these questions and apply them in our own life and our situation. What have you learned about yourself and changes you may need to make in order to run your race and finish your course? As we've been looking at a few questions that can help us to evaluate our own character so that we'll not become bitter through the course of our lives, what do we do when we detect that our character is not what it should be, and perhaps that we have violated some of our own values and convictions? I think the beginning point is to refocus on God as our source and allow Him to do His work in our hearts. Are we empty enough for Him to fill? Are we open to being vulnerable during this season so that in our weakness, we'll be able to experience His strength? After evaluating our fundamental orientation and motivation, the next step is to then establish boundaries and life patterns that will guide us in our journey. These are typically in the areas we've already discussed, such as our physical life and relationships, mental health, finances, our leisure, and our spiritual disciplines. The process begins, though, by redigging these spiritual wells that will facilitate our relationship with Him. Then during this process, past regrets and resentments may be triggered, that's for sure. Things that we thought we had dealt with but maybe hadn't. If this is the case, we can allow the Lord to do that inner work by His Spirit so that we can move on and become better rather than those bitter people that we don't want to become. So take some time to evaluate your own heart, your values, and any issues maybe that you've not dealt with in the past. What steps do you need to take to help you move forward in this stage of your life? As we conclude this episode, allow me to make a few more comments regarding life roles during this season. As we age, we typically have greater choice in the roles we have in life. In the last third, we will need to choose if we will continue in these roles thrust upon us over the years, or if we will choose to reject roles based on power and position and instead be involved in pursuing matters of significance. At this point, there are a couple options. We can use our experience and positions to increase our own reputation, or we can live a life of authenticity rather than one based on power and position. The passage in Philippians 2 that we've looked at several times in this series comes to mind. We're challenged to have the mindset of Christ, the nature of a servant rather than functioning out of selfish ambition. In humility, he says, valuing others above ourselves. Jesus is our model, isn't He? If we have not done this up to this point, to finish the race, we'll need to return to a servant leadership model ourselves. But during this season, we have the opportunity to reevaluate what success is and who we really are. Jesus was making this point to Peter at the post-resurrection breakfast they had there along the Sea of Galilee. The fact of the matter is, as we age, our limitations often force humility upon us. Yet it's much healthier, and I would suggest easier in the long run, if we humble ourselves and accept our new role. Authenticity in life and ministry can only be rediscovered by spending time with the Master and allowing His Spirit to fill us with His humility and grace. It's exhausting trying to be perfect or having it all together all the time. So why not take up His offer to humble ourselves? You might be amazed how freeing that really is. As we conclude, here are a few final thoughts to consider. As we look back over our life and ministry, were we driven by power and position, or were we those humble servant leaders that Jesus admonished us to be? And what steps can we take to live authentically so that we will become better and not bitter? Well, I know I've asked a lot of questions in this episode, and they may have been coming so fast and furious that you may need to go back and digest them in more bite-sized pieces. So to help you do that, we have offered the materials on our website so that you can go through the workbook offline and read all the scripture references. I have discovered this material is best implemented as a personal study and it reflects the process really that I went through as I was transitioning to this latter stage of life. Next time we want to dig a bit deeper into our mission, our life purpose, our calling, our mission, and our goals for the future. I think you'll find it helpful, and so I hope you join me.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Matters. If this has been helpful, please remember to like, subscribe, and share us. Doing this will enable others to benefit from this material as well. And remember, if you would like to have your own copy of this study, just click on the link in the description box, and for any of our other leadership resources, go to our website, icmcanada.org/resources.